Hi everyone, Blutrane here. I thought this month I'd try something a little bit different for my record of the month. Normally I send out a tweet, but I thought I'd challenge myself to try something different to share with you the music that I love to listen to. So as a pilot, I'm trying this out in video form. One-time thing, not sure if this is going to become a regular feature or not. Thought I'd challenge myself, put it out there, get some feedback, and see what you all think. So we're going to cover two things here today. I'm going to go over my record of the month, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper into an artist that's important to me and rank their records on a tier list. So to start off with, record of the month. Wanted to talk about Thundercat. It is what it is. This was recommended to me by a friend. A jazz fusion funk pop thing. Serious music, lighthearted lyrics, almost to the point of a meme. It tells the tale of an artist, an introvert, and his trials dealing with anxiety, life, love, and loss. It works really well. It shouldn't. I love it. I think everyone should check out this record. Thundercat in general. He's amazing. Highly recommended. Now, one of the things about Thundercat that really struck me that I didn't know is that one of my favorite jazz artists, Herbie Hancock, is an influence and oftentimes collaborator with Thundercat and the Brainfeeder label. And the friend who recommended Thundercat to me wanted to get into Herbie Hancock. Herbie Hancock has been performing and recording records for many years, since the 60s, and so there's so much material. Where to start? What to listen to? And so I thought this would be an excellent opportunity to share a little bit about Herbie Hancock with you. Herbie Hancock is a jazz pianist, a keyboardist, a band leader, best known for being a Miles Davis sideman and a pioneer of the fusion genre. Herbie Hancock has recorded over 40 records, has received Grammy for Album of the Year, a distinction that was only given to one other jazz record in the entire history of recorded music. And Herbie Hancock is an important artist to me because he really pioneered the jazz fusion genre, and this is a type of music that I find extremely enjoyable. With so many Herbie Hancock records, it would take hours to cover them all. So we're going to be covering his most important works between 1960 and 1980 as a band leader, and assigning them tiers. I want to be clear that tiers are relative to themselves and are strictly my opinion. Just because I rate an album C tier doesn't mean it's bad, just means there are other records of Herbie Hancock that I like better. This is strictly just my opinion, and I'm sure that there will be many of you that have differing opinions, so please leave a comment if you'd like to share what those are. Just dive right in. Full disclosure, I will be reviewing these records in chronological order rather than from worst to best or best to worst, just for continuity. In addition, I've prepared a playlist of Herbie Hancock tunes from a selection of these albums in playlists that are in the video description, a YouTube playlist, Spotify title. So if you really are overwhelmed and want a starting point where to get into Herbie Hancock, this would be a great resource. YouTube playlist is free, with ads of course. Spotify and Tidal work if you have subscriptions to those services. All right, let's dive right in. Starting off with Taking Off. Recorded in 1962, this is Herbie Hancock's debut and breakout album. A fantastic record and one of the finest of the hard bop genre. Hard bop being a type of jazz that's known to be bluesy and earthy. An expert crew of musicians performed splendidly, including one of my favorites, Dexter Gordon on the saxophone, whose solo on the song The Maze must be heard to be believed. This record also debuted the song Watermelon Man, which is now a jazz classic and standard. Taking Off is A tier. Following, we have My Point of View, recorded in 1963. This record feels like an attempt to recapture the magic of Taking Off, especially the song Watermelon Man. Nothing here is offensive or groundbreaking, and the album is a decent record in itself, but nothing really stands out. There's no reason to listen to this over Taking Off. So for that, My Point of View is D tier. In 1963, the same year, Herbie Hancock recorded Inventions and Dimensions. This one's a bit of an odd duck, and if you want to hear Herbie Hancock's take on the Latin genre, this is really your option. The record's well performed and has top hat percussionist Willie Bobo helping to drive the music, another artist I recommend you check out. But there's nothing here that really stands the test of time. What I do think this record highlights is Herbie's propensity to take chances, even if the results may be varied or fall flat. Inventions and Dimensions sits in the D tier. Next up, we have Empyrean Islands. This is a pretty groundbreaking record in that it moves away from the earthy soul jazz hard bop style to a more free-formed modal style. Although free is a scary word in jazz, and this is a record that's still eminently listenable and accessible, although a slightly more challenging one. Some of the musicians that Herbie was performing with Miles Davis join him on this record, like Freddie Hubbard on the trumpet, who's on fire throughout. This record also contains the tune Cantaloupe Island, which is another jazz standard, a great song. But really what we start to see here is Herbie Hancock's signature piano playing style. So this is really a maturation of Herbie Hancock's style, an important record in his discography. Empyrean Islands is B tier. Next up, we have Maiden Voyage. Maiden Voyage, if it were a painting, I would characterize it as an impressionist painting. It's Herbie Hancock's magnum opus, and I believe a work of art that will stand the test of time. The music sketches out a vague story of discovery, tragedy, loss, adversity, and finally peace. Musicians are all in top form. Many standards are derived from this album, including Maiden Voyage and the song Dolphin Dance. This is a must listen, my absolute favorite, Maiden Voyage, S tier. On the heels of Maiden Voyage, we have Speak Like a Child. This is where we see another transformation in Herbie's music, moving away from these impressionist freeform sketches to more focused compositions. Now, that's not a bad thing necessarily, and Speak Like a Child has a lot of really good songs. It's more of a straight-ahead recording, which does make it slightly more accessible, and really underscores Herbie Hancock's signature playing style. The tune Speak Like a Child itself is a classic, and there's some other really good compositions as well, but lacks some of the excitement from Maiden Voyage. Speak Like a Child, C tier. Next up, we have The Prisoner. Recorded in 1969, this was a tribute to Martin Luther King Jr. and featured some new musicians not featured on Herbie Hancock's previous albums. Joe Henderson, the saxophonist, and Hubert Laws, the flautist, most notably. Stylistically, this feels a lot like Speak Like a Child, and this is not a record I've listened to many times because it's just not as good as Speak Like a Child. You know, it's not bad, but there's no shortage of Herbie Hancock recorded material to listen to, and so this is one that I don't really go for. Nothing offends, nothing stands out. The Prisoner is D tier. Next up, we have Fat Albert Rotunda. And this is where Herbie's transition to jazz fusion and funk really begins. Joe Henderson comes along for the ride. We start to see some real catchy tunes on this record. It's a lot of fun, if a little inconsistent. And I like this record far more than one probably should, just because of the fun factor and really the underscoring of what's to come. Fat Albert Rotunda, C tier. Next up, we have a collection of recordings: Mwandishi, The Crossing, and Sextant. These three records are collectively known as the Mwandishi period. Whenever albums get lumped together as kind of a collective work, it's generally a bad sign. I've listened to these a couple times, and what we have here are fusion records that are kind of spacey and out there and freeform, and they're a bit of a challenging listen, not ones that really catch my ears. There are some folks out there that love these three records, and they're really not for me, but they really paved the way for what was to come. I think I'll give these another listen just out of interest to what they represent, but I'm going to have to rank the Mwandishi records collectively in E tier. Headhunters. Headhunters is groundbreaking in absolutely every respect. This is the quintessential jazz fusion album. The song Chameleon is an absolute classic that is catchy and surprisingly complex. The rest of the program on the record is banger after banger, including an interesting reinterpretation of the classic Watermelon Man. Headhunters is just a great listen, one that I can't recommend enough, and it sits in the A tier. Thrust, which followed Headhunters a year later, does everything that Headhunters does, but is more refined, with better compositions if that's at all possible. The song Actual Proof and Butterfly are absolute standouts. The build-ups, breakdowns, improvisational chemistry between the band is beyond description. This record is divine, my absolute favorite jazz fusion record, not only for Herbie Hancock, but in the entire genre. You must listen to Thrust. S tier. Next up we have Manchild. So Manchild occupies the descending right curve of the peak of Herbie Hancock albums. So if Thrust is the pinnacle, Manchild is what comes next. And so it's still very high up there. And probably the most straightforward funk outing that Herbie Hancock recorded to date. The band is augmented by guitarist Wah Wah Watson, which kind of adds a lot of great guitar riffs and kind of rock motifs. It's a really fun record and a really good one too. And for that, I will rate Manchild B tier. Next up we have Secrets. And Secrets is where the decline starts, and this recording's a bit of a mixed bag, and really the last of the great Headhunter records with the Headhunters band. There are some really good songs on Secrets that are worth listening to, including the tune Spider, which is a classic in the Headhunters repertoire and worth the price of admission alone. That being said, the quality of the records, decline. They're still great, but I mean, like I said at the beginning, everything being relative to itself. C tier. Now finally, we have Mr. Hands. Recorded in 1980, this is the last of the great Herbie Hancock records, and I think this is a really great one. It really caps off the prior 20 years of acoustic, soul, fusion jazz in a single package, with varied musicians that Herbie performed with throughout for the last 20 years. It's often overlooked because there's far more exciting material that was recorded earlier, but there's a lot of good on here, and I really think that this is a great record to listen to, especially if you're looking for some deeper Herbie Hancock cuts. There's a touch of the 80s modern as well, but not so much that it sounds like 80s cheese, and you've got Jaco Pastorius who joins for the tune 4 a.m., which is a great one as well. Mr. Hands is a great record to cap off the classic era. I list Mr. Hands as B tier. So there you have it. The Herbie Hancock classic era tier list, Maiden Voyage and Thrust sitting at the top. Two of my favorite records, Maiden Voyage being an acoustic jazz record, Thrust being a fusion jazz record. Those are my two favorite. Taken Off, another great acoustic jazz record, and Chameleon, almost as good. Those four records I listen to several times a year, constant rotation. The records in B and C I listen to fairly regularly as well. They're all fantastic. So I'm curious if you're a Herbie Hancock fan, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? If you're not a Herbie Hancock fan and the thought of listening to an entire record is a bit scary, again, those playlists are in the video description, so you can check those out as well. I want to thank Nate Wolfe, who helped produce the amazing graphics for this video, and Jack Harris for inspiring me to try something new to take this content out of a tweet to a video form. This was interesting. I'm interested in feedback. Again, this is a pilot, a one-time thing. You can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/Blutrane. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to watch this. Like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you think. Until next time, happy listening.